Good afternoon / evening, everybody. We are back with another episode of AL.com's Playoff Central presented by Medical Properties Trust, where we get you guys caught up on all of the headlines, all of the big news coming out of Dallas as Alabama continues to prepare for the college football playoffs. I'm Matt Scalisi, and I'm joined today by John Talty, who is our sports editor over on the print side and is going to be running all of our coverage from Dallas. John, you and your crew will be heading down there tomorrow. A number of our teammates are already traveling down there right now, and will be tomorrow. So, we've adapted this week to trying our best to do our job from up here remotely in Alabama. But Alabama's had to do some adaptation as well. They've actually been preparing on the offensive side without a couple of their coaches. But we did get to talk to one of those coaches today, Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator. So I guess just to start us off, John, tell us a little bit about the conversation that you and the other writers had with Bill O'Brien today, and kind of how he's dealing with the fact that he's having to coach this team and get them ready for a playoff game remotely so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all enjoyed talking to Bill O'Brien today. It's the first time we've talked to him since before the season started. We got a whopping 15 minutes with him. I think we could have gone an hour because there's just a lot to ask him about. But like you said, I think a lot of the some of the questions to start out were kind of about the lead up to this game and the fact that he had recently tested positive for COVID-19. So when he was asked about it, he said the one thing that helped him was his experience last year with the Texans, and that so much of what they had to do was on Zoom, especially early on dealing with it, that it wasn't unique or challenging for him to do some of this stuff remotely because he's already had to do it before. Reference multiple people that they've been able to help out with this week, and I think that's one of the advantages that Alabama has is that Doug Marrone also tested positive for COVID-19. He's out, and the guy that steps in is Joe Pendry, who's probably one of the most well accomplished and well respected offensive line coaches in the last 40 years, and was part of the early dynasty years at Alabama. So Alabama has the advantage of having a lot of people that can help to step in. They've been through it again as an organization last year when Saban was out, and they had to step in and do different things while he was out. The news that came out of that today was that he was able to fly out to Dallas and is able to now start be around the team wearing a mask based on the most recent CDC recommendations that the SEC adopted. So he was able to get out there. He seemed excited about they were able to make some changes to allow him to come back sooner, and seems ready for the game in a couple of days.
And we'll get more into the protocol changes that allow that to happen a little bit later in the show here. But John, in terms of the offensive side, it's certainly been, I think, a very interesting group this year, and has some big personalities on it, and has been through a lot of very dramatic ups and downs. They've had games where they looked terrible. They had games where they literally broke school records. Two of those games came back to back during the season. So it's a very unpredictable, very unusual group of guys. But when you put them in a media setting, we don't seem to be getting a ton of big trash talk, I guess, out of them. I mean, that would be a little atypical for Alabama in general. But these guys are pretty even keel when we get them in front of a microphone as a group.
Yeah, well, and I think what helps is that, for Alabama's sake, this is all on Zoom. And so, usually at a big media day, you might get to talk to some of the guys who might, have a little bit more fun or spirited personalities. And, instead, we got to talk to Bryce Young today, who's about as even keeled as it gets. Bryce is very thoughtful, but I mean, I don't even know what scenario you could possibly put him in which you would say anything remotely close to bulletin board material. I mean, they have the guys they have out there this week are, either they're very polished guys or the guys they know that will say absolutely nothing remotely controversial. And so that's kind of what we got, again today. Brian Robinson, he's not going to say anything controversial. So they've been very respectful to Cincinnati. I think there's been a lot of questions this week about, what was the turning point? How did they kind of get to where they are now? There was a lot of talk about, that Texas A&M game being, really the point where they realized they had to do more. And that's not a surprise. I mean, I think Saban's talked a lot over the years about, sometimes it takes a loss to kind of get guys to, buy in and wake up to, what needs to be done. But it's been, I don't want to say boring, but there has not been a ton, for people like you and me to talk about based on what we've, seen so far. And I think that's also because, and, I've talked to our beat writers about this, the last couple of days. There's no history between these two teams. It's a real stretch to try to find any of them. Mike Tressel, the defensive coordinator today, was asked about, he was at Michigan State when Alabama played them in the Cotton Bowl a few years back. And I mean, he just kind of dodged the question. I mean, that was basically the biggest connection we had between these two schools. There's just not a lot of links between them the way that we would have with, of course, Alabama, Georgia, and even with Alabama, Michigan. You have Josh Gaddis and some of the other guys on that staff. So there's just not a lot of natural connections, not a lot of, trash talking, not a lot of buzz. It's kind of weird. That's the only way I can really put it. Just kind of a weird lead up to this game on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only other kind of comparable situation I can think of that we've covered in terms of Alabama's run here is when they played Washington in a semifinal a few years ago, where it just felt like there wasn't really any real heat between the two sides. And I think you've seen the two teams, I think, try to motivate themselves and get themselves fired up for the game a little bit. Probably a little bit of a tougher assignment for Alabama in that regard than Cincinnati.
Will Anderson's trying.
He's trying. Will Anderson tried, yeah.
Yeah, I think different about this one too, though, is that Washington, I totally agree. And then, of course, a couple of days after that game, Lane Kiffin gets pushed out. So with that game, you had Lane Kiffin is leaving, and I think that's what's also interesting about this one is that for last year after the championship game, Sark, there's no big name leaving yet. I mean, of course, guys will eventually leave probably after the season, but you don't even have that kind of hanging over and driving the storylines of Bill O'Brien's about to go to X place. How is he going to manage it? The way that Georgia's going through right now with Dan Lanning.
Yeah, I think there's for sure there's plenty of drama over in the Orange Bowl right now. I mean, they're literally flying key players in day by day who are coming out of COVID protocols. Much less drama seems like so far in Dallas. But we have heard a little bit of different energy from Cincinnati as they've been having their media availabilities, Sean. And I think, as much as we joke about Will Anderson talking about Alabama feeling like they're disrespected, perhaps it's kind of an easier sell for Cincinnati players to believe that they're multiple touchdown underdogs going into this game. I think you're going to hear a lot of people saying, framing this game as a game that they don't have much of a shot in, and they have to get very creative and play differently than they've been playing all year. What was kind of your sense hearing Cincinnati players and coaches so far of sort of what's their attitude going into this week?
I think they're a little sick of hearing about it, and this is a team that, went undefeated this year, beat Notre Dame. And, I think it's been framed as, in some ways, as a David versus Goliath type battle here. And, I think you saw Jerome Ford kind of push back yesterday, stop calling me the Bama transfer. I'm not just that guy. I'm now a very good running back. I think that some of the guys, yesterday also were kind of don't hang all of the group 5 on us. That's not what we want to be here. And so I think that there's been some frustration. I don't know, frustration might be too strong of a word, but I think there was some pushback on some of that stuff. And I think you're seeing confidence coming out of Cincinnati. I think we heard that again today, and I think especially defense. I mean, this is a defense that has some really good players. They have on one side of the cornerback, a guy who hasn't given up a touchdown his entire career. On the other side, they have the guy who was the Jim Thorpe Award winner, who was the best nation's best defensive back. So I think there's some confidence from them that they can compete against this Alabama team. And so I think that there's, just some kind of feelings about all right, we're sick of hearing about how big of an underdog we are. Let's do this. Let's play the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, there's no question, no matter how good Nick Saban is at motivating his teams and making them feel like they've got a chip on their shoulder, I think Cincinnati will probably be the team with a little bit more of that energy going into this game, no matter what. So, Alabama probably going to stick more into the football X's and O's aspect of it, and it seems like, from what we heard from them yesterday, that's kind of how they're trying to keep it. There's a lot of staying inside the hotel, not really doing any of the typical team activities, really kind of keeping it locked down and making this almost a football only trip for them.
It's a business trip, yeah, and I think that's something that Nick Saban. If you look over the last 2 years, I think why Alabama has done as well as they have, beyond just the typical great players and great coaching, is that they've managed this pandemic really well, and I think we knew that Saban would do well at that, and I think you're seeing it here, where Saban talked to the team about it, but Bryce Young talked today about how they as a group decided, like, we're not going out and doing anything this week. Like, this is about, like, staying in the hotel, doing what we need to do. And I think that speaks a lot to this leadership group that has developed over the course of the year and really stepped up on the back half of the year and able to kind of take ownership of this team that, Bryce talked about. They're not doing the fun stuff that you usually get, with a bowl game. They didn't go to the Cowboys game, even though they were in Dallas, and, some Cincinnati players did go to that game. They're not, doing any fun stuff, going out to big team dinners and stuff like that together. Like, it's very much like, we don't want to do anything that could possibly impact our chances to win on Friday. And so they're taking it very seriously. And so I think that's why, they have a lot of confidence that there's not going to be some, massive outbreak or anything like that, because they're doing everything they can to control what they can control.
For sure. Well, speaking of trying to keep things under control, John, we know that the COVID situation has been something that Alabama has largely kept under control on their team this year, has not impacted them nearly as much as it has a lot of other programs in college football. And we've seen in the postseason, particularly, it's had a big effect, canceling lots of games. Another bowl game tonight, the Holiday Bowl, I believe, was canceled this afternoon due to COVID-related issues. But Alabama has so far, knock on wood, had pretty good luck with this and keeping it contained. We did get a little bit of news about potential changes. Well, not potential, they've now been made official, but the SEC changing essentially how COVID will be handled when players test positive going forward.
Yeah, and that's what allowed Bill O'Brien, I think, to fly out to Dallas today. And so I think it's what we expected to happen. There were a lot of people in college athletics that were really hoping that the CDC would kind of revise its guidelines down from 10 days to 5. I think, again, we have a lot more information now. I think people realize that, testing people who don't have symptoms and then, putting them out for 10 days is just, basically ravaging sports, over the last couple of weeks. I mean, again, if you watch any of the NBA, I mean, there are players who you've never even heard of that are being signed off the street and immediately being put into starting positions. It's crazy how it's impacted sports over the last couple of weeks. And so when the CDC announced, their adjustment, you're seeing, again, in college sports, these conferences quickly adjusting it. And so the SEC is joining some of its conference peers and adjusting, from 10 to 5 based on the CDC recommendations. And, that might not seem like a big deal, but again, I mean, it's a difference between a week and 2 weeks. And with, games coming up here and there, every day matters. And so from that 10 to 5 really helps if guys do get it, they can come back a lot faster. And so, if somebody gets it now, they're not, knocked out for something down the line. So I think it's well received. It'll have a big impact on basketball and other sports as well. But for football, right now, it's allowing, some of these coaches like Doug Marrone and Bill O'Brien who've tested positive to be able to come back and have more, interactions and not have to do it remotely.
Well, we will have plenty of news for everybody as the week continues on. But starting tomorrow, we'll start to have a lot more of that directly from Dallas for you as a lot of the AL.com team makes its way down there to start covering things in person. John, we're looking forward to the work from you and your team as you guys always do such a great job keeping us updated. All of their work you can find over at AL.com, or if you want to drill down, go to AL.com/Alabama football. You'll find everything related to this game over there this week. But meanwhile, we will have Playoff Central for you every single day, wherever you're watching this right now, as well as all of the press conferences that we're getting from the Cotton Bowl and lots of other video content from you guys on our Alabama football channels here on YouTube or Facebook. So thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to our sponsor, Medical Properties Trust. And we will see everybody tomorrow with another update from the Cotton Bowl. So thanks, John, for joining us, and thanks to our audience. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Medical Properties Trust. At the very heart